They told me I didn't belong there right in front of everyone, and the woman who said it had this look on her face like she was doing me a favor by letting me know before I embarrassed myself further. What she didn't know was that in less than 10 minutes, my name would be announced from that stage, and every single person in that room would realize they'd made a terrible mistake. I had received the invitation 3 weeks earlier, a thick cream-colored envelope with gold lettering that said Annual Metropolitan Charity Gala, and when I opened it, I almost thought it was sent to me by mistake, because people like me usually get invited to events like that. I was 28 years old, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat, living in a small studio apartment on the outskirts of the city, and the idea of attending a gala where tickets cost more than my monthly rent felt surreal. But the invitation was real. It had my name on it, so I decided to go. I borrowed a dress from a friend, simple and black, nothing fancy, did my own hair and makeup, and took the subway to the venue. Because I couldn't afford a car, let alone a hired driver like most of the people who would be there. When I arrived at the hotel, the lobby was filled with people in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, dripping in jewelry that probably cost more than my entire year's salary, and I immediately felt out of place. I walked through the gold-framed doors into the ballroom, and the space was breathtaking, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, tables covered in silk, centerpieces made of white roses and candles, everything gleaming and perfect, and I stood near the entrance for a moment, just taking it all in, trying to calm the nervous flutter in my chest. I found my assigned table near the back of the room, tucked away in a corner where the lighting was dimmer and the conversations quieter, and I sat down, smoothing my dress and trying to look like I belonged. The other seats at my table were empty at first, but slowly people started arriving, older women in fur stoles, men with expensive watches, couples who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, and when they saw me sitting there, I could feel their eyes scanning me up and down, taking in my dress, my shoes, my lack of jewelry, and I saw the judgment settle on their faces like dust. One of the women, silver-haired and wearing a necklace that could probably pay off my student loans, leaned toward her husband and whispered something, and he glanced at me and then looked away quickly, like I was something uncomfortable to acknowledge. Another woman, younger, maybe in her 40s, with sharp cheekbones and a red dress that probably cost thousands, sat down across from me and didn't say hello, didn't smile, just opened her clutch and checked her phone like I wasn't even there. I tried to start a conversation, said something polite about the beautiful venue, and she looked up at me with cold eyes and said, him, before going back to her phone, and that was it. That was the only acknowledgement I got. As the evening went on, I felt smaller and smaller, like I was shrinking into my chair, and every time I tried to join a conversation, people would either ignore me or give me short, dismissive answers that made it clear they had no interest in talking to me. At one point, a server came by with champagne, and when I reached for a glass, the woman in red looked at me and said, loud enough for others to hear, "Are you sure you should be drinking that? I mean, is it appropriate?" And the way she said it made my cheeks burn with humiliation, because I knew exactly what she was implying, that I didn't belong, that I was out of my depth, that I shouldn't even be there. Then came the moment that made everything worse, the moment I'll never forget. A man, atushado, probably in his 60s, with slicked-back gray hair and a condescending smile, walked up to our table and started chatting with the others, shaking hands, laughing at inside jokes. I didn't understand, and when he finally noticed me, he paused, looked me up and down with narrowed eyes, and said, "I don't think we've met. Are you someone's assistant?" And before I could answer, the woman in red laughed and said, "Oh, I don't think she's supposed to be here at all." And the man raised his eyebrows and said, "Well, this is a private event, for donors and sponsors. Maybe there's been some kind of mistake." And I felt my face go hot, my hands start to shake, and I opened my mouth to explain, to tell them that I had an invitation, that I was supposed to be there, but the words got stuck in my throat because the way they were all looking at me like I was an intruder, like I was someone who didn't matter, made me feel so small I could barely breathe. I sat there in silence, staring down at my lap, fighting back tears, wondering if I should just leave, just walk ouchie, and pretend this night never happened. And I almost did. I almost stood up and walked away, but then something inside me said, "Stay, just stay a little longer." So I stayed. The lights dimmed, and a woman in an elegant silver gown walked onto the stage, tapped the microphone, and the room fell silent, everyone turning their attention to the front, and she started talking about the charity, about the incredible work they'd been doing, about the generous donors who made it all possible, and I tried to focus on her words. tried to ignore the burning shame still sitting in my chest. Then she said something that made my heart stop. Tonight we want to recognize someone very special, someone whose contribution this year has been truly extraordinary, someone who despite their young age has shown a level of generosity and commitment that has moved us all, and I felt my pulse quicken, felt a strange sense of dread mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite name. She continued, this individual donated over $500,000 to our programs this year, funding scholarships, medical supplies, housing for families in need, and they did it quietly, without fanfare, without asking for recognition. And the room started murmuring, people whispering to each other, wondering who it could be. And I sat there, frozen, because I knew what was coming. I knew. And part of me wanted to disappear, but another part of me wanted to stand up and scream. The woman on stage smiled, looked down at the card in her hand, and said, it is my honor to announce this year's Philanthropist of the Year award goes to. And she paused, letting the anticipation build. And then she said, my name, my full name, clear and loud, echoing through the ballroom, and the room went completely silent. People started looking around, confused, turning their heads, whispering, who is that? And I could feel every single pair of eyes searching, trying to figure out who this person was, and slowly, very slowly, people at my table started to realize, started to turn toward me, and the expressions on their faces shifted from confusion to shock to horror. The woman in red, who had mocked me just minutes earlier, went pale, her mouth falling open, and the man who had questioned whether I belonged there looked like he'd been slapped. His iced, widgy, his jaw clenched, and the older woman with the fur stole actually gasped, her hand flying to her chest like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The woman on stage continued, this young woman worked tirelessly, sacrificed her own comfort, took on extra jobs, saved every penny all so she could give back to a cause that changed her life when she was younger, and tonight we celebrate her incredible generosity and selflessness. And the applause started. Slow H first, then building, filling the room. And I sat there, unable to move, unable to breathe, feeling 1,000 emotions at once. People at other tables turned to look at me, saw me clapping, some just staring, and I could see the recognition dawning on their faces, the realization that they had dismissed me, ignored me, humiliated me, and they had been so wrong. The woman on stage invited me to come up, gestured toward me with a warm smile, and everyone was watching, waiting, and I slowly stood up, my legs shaking, and started walking toward the stage. And as I passed tables, I could hear whispers, that's her? Really? I had no idea. And some people started clapping louder, standing up, but others just sat there, frozen, unable to reconcile the person they had judged with the person being honored. When I reached the stage, the woman handed me a crystal award, heavy and beautiful, and she hugged me, whispered, you are amazing. And I stood there at the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces, some smiling, some still shocked, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't prepare a speech, didn't expect to be standing there, so I just spoke from my heart, said, thank you, this means more to me than you know. I grew up with nothing, and this charity gave me a chance when no one else would, so giving back was the least I could do. And my voice cracked a little, and I saw some people in the audience wipe their eyes, but I also saw the woman in red looking down at her lap, refusing to meet my gaze, and the man who questioned me staring at the table like he wished he could disappear. I didn't say anything about what happened earlier, didn't call anyone out, didn't shame them publicly, because I didn't need to. The truth had already done that for me, and I walked off the stage to more applause, made my way back to my table, and no one said a word. After the ceremony ended, people started approaching me, suddenly wanting to talk, wanting to shake my hand, tell me how inspiring I was, and it was surreal, almost laughable, because just an hour earlier, these same people had looked at me like I was nobody. The woman in red eventually came up to me, her face flushed, and said, I didn't know, I'm sorry, and her apology felt empty, hollow, because she wasn't sorry for what she said, she was sorry she'd been wrong, and there's a difference. I just nodded, said, it's okay, even though it wasn't, and she walked away quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I left the gala that night the same way I arrived, alone, taking the subway home, still wearing my borrowed dress, holding the crystal award in my hands, and I thought about everything that had happened. How people had judged me based on my appearance, my clothes, my lack of status, how they had made me feel like I didn't belong, and how wrong they had been. I realized that night that respect isn't something you can buy with money or clothes or jewelry. It's something you earn by being true to who you are, by doing what's right even when no one is watching, and the people who judge you without knowing you will always be the ones left speechless when the truth comes out. I didn't go to that gala for recognition. I went because I was invited, and I stayed because something inside me refused to let their judgment define me, and in the end, I didn't need to prove anything to them. The truth did that for me. That night taught me that belonging isn't about fitting into someone else's idea of who you should be. It's about knowing your worth and carrying it with you, no matter where you are, no matter who's watching, and that's something no one can ever take away from you.